Hey now, the other day I picked up a bunch of boneless pork butt, and this is a big chunk of it right here. And I knew it was time to make some porkstrami, which, as the name suggests, is simply a twist on beef pastrami, but using this flavorful and incredibly delicious pork shoulder. So let's get at it. Now, a few quick things about this recipe. First of all, we're doing a dry brine. I'm not submerging this in a wet brine solution or anything like that. We're doing an equilibrium cure, which means that all of the salt and all of the flavor, everything that we have in with this cure seasoning that we're putting together is exactly what we want in the finished product. So there's no freshening or anything like that required. Also, I'm going to be giving you percentages of the cure, the spices, all of those things there. What that means is that you're able to size this and scale it for any size or weight of meat. I'm going to have the full recipe and an explanation of the calculation and all of that in the video description as well. However, essentially what you need to do is weigh your meat. And yes, we're doing this in grams, okay? Grams just plays super nicely with math. Imperial doesn't. We're doing this in grams. Get a scale, use grams. It's incredibly easy. You're simply going to weigh your meat in grams, multiply that by the percentage of whatever the particular ingredient is, and it will give you the exact quantity that you need. It's an easy way to make this happen for any type of meat. There we go. So taking a look here, I did say this is a cured meat product. That's the only way to make any type of pastrami here. It's just part of the process. So starting off, I've got some sodium nitrite here. That's like cure number 1 or prod powder number 1, whatever particular product you're getting. With the cure that I have here, I'm going with 0.25% of that. I'm also using sodium erythorbate here, and that's going to help prevent the formation of nitrosamines, and it should also help speed up the curing process. This is a really good ingredient to use if you are using cure in your products here, and I've got 0.05% of that. It's a very small quantity. I'm just going to fire that in my bowl. I've got 2.5% kosher salt. That is a quantity you can play around with. If you like it a little bit saltier, feel free to increase that. I've got 0.25% garlic powder and 0.35% paprika. Those are both a bit of a jump from my pork loin pastrami that I like to make. Just because with the higher fat content in here, I wanted to bump those up. I've got 0.3% black pepper, 0.15% of ground bay leaves, and also 0.15% of ground allspice. And finally, to help balance things out here, I've got 2% of brown sugar. I'm going with turbinado sugar or sugar in the raw, something like that here. Going to give this a quick mix. And we're ready to add to our meat. I've got my pork butt here in this nice little meat tub. This is usually how I like to apply cures and seasonings and things like that to larger pieces of meat, because it's a good way to be able to splash it on and get sort of a nice little original coating around things without splashing any sort of stuff around on my countertop. We'll also get some on the inside here. Just try to make sure that we've got some of this rub around every part of this meat before we package it up here. Let's get that into the bag. Then I'm going to follow that up with any of this excess cure and rub that was in here. Normally I like doing this in vacuum bags because I find they are less likely to try to leak on me than Ziploc bags are. I have had the odd mild mishap over the years just with some of the brine trying to leak out once these really start to get some liquid going on the inside here. However, I'm using the extra large Ziploc bags here because, well, it fits this quite nicely, whereas my other bags that I use with my Food Saver vacuum sealer are not quite wide enough. It's a bit of a struggle to get this piece of meat in here. So now I'm just going to write the actual product and the date on here. I'm going to get this into the refrigerator, keep it nice and cold. Every day or so, I'm just going to pull it out, give it a little massage, move things around a little bit here, make sure we have a nice even distribution of everything, and we will do that until we are cured. It's been 3 weeks since we began the journey of curing that porkstrami, probably just a little bit longer than it needed based on the thickness of the meat and everything that we had in there. However, this is all about getting lots of flavor into that pork, and today's a convenient day for me to smoke it, so that's also kind of where the timing comes into play. With that equilibrium cure, you can't really over-cure by time, and the salinity is exactly what we want. So all I've done is I've taken that bag out. It's just warming up here on the counter, but we need to get the rub ready for the actual smoke. Now, I do have all of these ingredients actually weighed out and done by percentages, just like I did for the cure. However, this is actually a little bit more forgiving. If you're doing this and you're just like, I just want to throw whatever I want on there, by all means, do you. That's totally fine. Of course, I'm just a little OCD, so I have everything set up in a spreadsheet and whatever. It's automatically calculated for me. Now I've got some coarse ingredients here. I'm starting off with some peppercorns. That's 1% based on that original weight that I had. I'm going to be firing this just into this spice mill that I've got just to break it up a little bit. I 0.16% of whole coriander here. And that's also because it's just so incredibly light. Might seem a little counterintuitive to have these whole ingredients and then bust them up, but I do find that they just taste a lot fresher. I've also just added here some yellow mustard seed that was 0.4%. As you can see here, I did leave obviously some chunks. I wanted this chunky, but I wanted to break into most of those whole pieces just to release some of that flavor. I also have some ground coriander here just to really make sure we've got some nice coriander character in there. That's 0.25%. Also some mustard powder here just to give it a little bit more kick and enhance that mustard character, and that's 0.09%. Some raw cane sugar here. You could use brown sugar or anything like that. That's 0.55%. Some smoked paprika, 0.25%. 0.36% of garlic powder, and 0.22% of onion powder. Give this a nice little mix here. For the record, I did measure this out here, and this is just over 3/4 of a cup of this rub that'll be going onto the pork. And here we are, rinsed off, patted dry. You can see there's still some of that original seasoning on there, but I do just like to start sort of fresh here with it. I'm gonna take this nice little seasoning rub here and get a nice layer all over our porkstrami. Well, I've got all of that seasoning rub on here. This is the fat side up on the top. I did add some of the excess because there was just a little bit more than I needed in there. Now I am going to take a couple of my Inkbird probes here and insert them into this porkstrami roast, just so that we can track the temperatures as this cooks and just keep a good eye on things. I have my FitBoss 700 FB set at 250 degrees Fahrenheit here, which would be a great temperature for smoking this. I'm just going to set this directly on the rack. I removed the top rack just to give myself a little bit more operational room here, and we'll just get this covered up. After a few hours, things are progressing along nicely here temperature-wise. I also threw my insulated blanket on my pit boss here just because it's quite cool outside. Woo! And check out this porkstrami. It smells amazing. Oh yes. So we are nearly 5 hours in here, and we are starting to get near the end of this smoke here. So just about 6 hours in, we have finally hit the temperature I'm after, which is 180 degrees Fahrenheit. I know that we've got some varying opinions on where you'd like that to land for a finishing temperature, but this will hopefully be a really good balance between cooking a lot of that fat and everything like that, but also leaving this still sliceable. So let's pull this off and let it rest. After resting for over half an hour, it was time to slice into this porkstrami. We really tried to be patient, but we simply could not hold off any longer. The smell in the kitchen was driving us nuts. And by we, I mean my family and some guests that we invited over for this feast. The excitement in the kitchen and the whole main floor of my house was fairly loud, so I'm doing this with voiceover. With that combination of the smoker action and the spice rub, the bark on this is crispy and crunchy. Just cutting into it, anticipation of that wicked bark was just building exponentially. Everybody was standing around and drooling, just waiting to dig into this meat. You can see that the pork is nice and pink, and that's coming from the curing phase, and even after a decent amount of time in the smoker, it's still nice and juicy. And that is the bonus of working with that fatty and flavorful shoulder cut. It was just wild to cut through the harder bark on the top, slide that knife through the meat, and then have to work again to get it through the bottom bark. To serve, we wanted to head in the direction of Reuben sandwiches, so we started off with some light rye bread. On one slice, I spread some homemade Russian dressing, and on the other, my horseradish mustard. Then we wanted some melty cheese on there, so I added some slices of creamy Havarti on both sides. You can go with any cheese that you like for this. I wanted to balance out the rich pork and that cheese fat there with some acidity, so I added a nice healthy layer of my habanero sauerkraut. This is super delicious, acidic, spicy, and helps me get my heat fix on here. Then, of course, we're on to the star of the show. We've got a nice thick layer of the porkstrami on there, which afterwards I topped with some of my carabicini pickled peppers, and then just closing up the sandwich, I spread some olive oil margarine on the outside, and that was just going to give us a little bit of fat on the exterior, and then we hit the frying pan to melt that cheese and to get a really nice crust on the bread. All right, I had to escape downstairs here because there's a whole bunch of people upstairs enjoying this porkstrami. Let's try it out. want to go with some of that bark here first. It's so crispy. Now what I like about the bark on this is that it's like super nice and crunchy and crispy, and then right underneath you have that nice like smooth layer of fat. It's just delicious. Helps smooth everything out. Then a little chunk of the meat on its own. Just the perfect level of salt in there. Nailed it with that salinity. All the flavors coming through here with the coriander, the pepper, everything. It really reminds me of that pork loin pastrami that I made, but it's just a little bit juicier there with the fat and whatnot that you get inside that pork butt. And then, this dangerous sandwich here, this reuben. Now it has everything I want in a sandwich. It's warm, it's crispy on the outside, it's got that nice creamy Russian dressing on the inside, it's got that habanero kraut, so it's got like some really nice heat, also pairing really well with that horseradish mustard, which also has some really good kick to it. And then of course that nice melty cheese in there, offering some of that fat to help cut through that. And then just all that porkstrami in there. Oh, fantastic. All right, I gotta go upstairs. I have to go eat this sandwich, probably devour a second one. I think there might be some vegetables out there, but there's zero interest in seeing any of that. The sauerkraut counts. The peppers and whatnot, I'm calling that my vegetable here for the meal. So give it a roll. Let me know how it turns out for you. And until next time, keep it at 11.